If you want to get out your Bibles, turn to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers 13. I entitled this series Echoes of Faith. And in the midst of all of our stories, we have different men and women, some of whom have shown tremendous faith and others have shown no faith. But we have examples given to us throughout these Old Testament stories that we're reading and learning about these different men and women who lived in the Old Testament. As we study these different characters in the Bible, many of them do demonstrate great faith, but some are exemplary. Some appear blameless and above everyone else, as though they are a prototypical example for all of us, a prototype of who we are supposed to be. And that is who one of the people that we will be studying tonight. As we study together, we're going to be looking at the life of a man named Caleb. Caleb was a man who had faith, unlike everyone else. He stood out from everyone else. His faith wasn't temporary. It wasn't just based on the moment, but it was a long-lasting and enduring faith that clung to God in an amazing way. And so that's what we're going to be studying about this evening. Caleb was, again, a person who lived during the time of slavery in Egypt. And he would have experienced what it would have been like to be a slave. Interestingly enough, I found out as I was studying this week, the name Caleb also means dog. So whoever was his owner, if that was his situation, he didn't think much of him if he was able to name him. It also can mean servant, and so maybe that would be more of the gesture, the idea of naming him Caleb. But Caleb was a man who was actually of Edomite descent as well as Israelite descent. And he was among the slaves of Israel who were saved through the plagues that God brought upon Egypt. He was brought out of that land and brought out of slavery, having witnessed those plagues. He crossed the Red Sea. He was one of the ones who witnessed that miracle. He heard the voice of God coming out of the mountain, just like all these others that we've been studying about in the past few weeks. And he was a man who experienced all of that and had the right kind of mindset about those events. Turns out, Caleb was selected to lead of all the people in the tribe of Judah, the largest tribe of all Israel. Caleb was selected to go along with the spies and enter into the land of Canaan in order to spy out the land. They would go into the promised land for 40 days, and they would see what that land was like, whether the land was lush, whether it provided fruit and food for the people, what the people of the land were like. Were they dangerous? Were there big armies? Were there big fortresses? And how strong did they appear? Those kind of things were on the minds of all the Israelites. And so the spies were to go out and to witness what it was like in the land of Canaan. Well, as they went out, and you could just imagine, 40 days in a foreign land with just you and 11 men from your nation, going into all of this region with all these foreign people who God has decided to annihilate because they are so wicked. It is time for them to be wiped off the face of the earth, and He has chosen to bring Israel up at this time, knowing that it was time for these wicked people to be removed from the face of the earth like Sodom and Gomorrah. And so you're one of 12 who's going out into a very wicked land and seeing what it's all like. That would have been kind of a terrifying thing. And yet he and his brothers went out and did this. They witnessed what it was like. They saw the fruit of the land, and it was lush. It was a land flowing with milk and honey. This is the way it was described to them, and described by them. So this was a land that was lush, a land that would produce, a land that would provide for the people of Israel who had been spending the last year in a wilderness, desert-like area that was very arid. They were moving up into the lush promised land with the trees, with abundant fruit and gardens plentiful. It would have been, the way it's portrayed, would have been like the Garden of Eden, prepared for them. And they were going throughout that land and seeing what it was like. When they came back, they provided a report to all the people, and the report was not good. Oh, the land was great. The land was beautiful. The land was lush. They brought back huge grapes and fruits and all kinds of treasures from the land that was available for the people to just go and take and eat if they were to move into that land. But also the spies brought back news of the fortresses that were in the land, of the giants that inhabited the land. And they told the people, we should not go into this land. It will not go well for us. We should instead go back to Egypt, where it is safe. 10 of the 12 spies made that proclamation. And all the people were in an uproar. All the people were upset. They were terrified at the idea of going into this land. And they had just left Egypt, and now they've been in this wilderness, and they've been nearly dying from thirst, nearly dying from starvation. And the land that they're going to, they're being told is impossible for them to take over. And so they're ready to hurt somebody. And Caleb speaks out in the midst of this huge crowd that is so upset and so terrified, and he's able to quiet them all. He silences them, and he brings them to a place where they can hear him. And he tells them, we should go up at once and occupy the land, for we will be able to overcome it. The people didn't listen. The men who were around him, who had gone up with him, aside from Joshua, the son of Nun of the tribe of Ephraim, refused to listen to Caleb and refused to believe that they could go up against the inhabitants of the land. They instead decided that they ought to go back to Egypt. Well, Moses and Aaron were upset about this, and they tried to plead with the congregation, please don't do this. And again, the next day, Caleb rose up again and said, the land which we passed by to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. You see how Caleb is speaking in this very bold and very strong way that God's going to be with us. We can do this. Don't say no. You're rebelling against God, who wants to provide for you this wonderful land. He has said he will give it. He will surely give it. Please don't do this. And at this, the people pick up stones to stone Caleb and Joshua and Moses and Aaron. And God brings his glory down to the tent of meeting, signifying to all the people, God's got something to say. And he speaks, and he tells the people, he tells Moses, how long will this people despise me? How long will they not believe in me? In spite of all the signs that I've done among them, I will strike them with pestilence and disinherit them, and I'll make a nation greater and mightier than they out of you. God's not happy with the people, to say the least. And Moses intercedes for the people and keeps God from immediately destroying them all, but God decides not a single one of them over the age of 20 will enter into this promised land. And all their children who they're terrified about the inhabitants of the land destroying, they will go in and they will inherit the promised land. Instead, my people will be forced to walk in the wilderness a year for every day that those spies spent in that promised land. 40 years they would spend in the wilderness. But God also says this in chapter 14, verse 21. Truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despised me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Notice here, he singles out Caleb. He recognizes the spirit that is within Caleb. That all the rest of the people saw all the signs and wonders in Egypt. They saw all that God had done to provide freedom from slavery, to provide them with everything they needed in the wilderness all along the way. They experienced all of that, and yet they didn't believe that he could give them the promised land. But Caleb saw all those things, and he took note, and he decided God is a faithful God who will surely deliver what he has promised. He will enter the promised land. So now imagine this. Caleb is now going to be forced to spend 40 years in the wilderness with these people as they die. Everyone will die over the age of 20 except for Caleb. Can you imagine that? I mean, funerals every day, people dying all the time. And it just keeps happening, and there's plagues that God brings upon them for their rebellion. The earth opens up and consumes some of them. Snakes are biting everybody. I mean, there's a lot of horrifying events that take place over the course of those 40 years. And where is Caleb? But he's there among them all along the way, knowing that he could be in the promised land right now. That he had to miss out on it because of these wicked, evil people who wouldn't listen to him. I wonder if he ever said, "I told you so." I probably would have said it a few times. Well, at the end of the 40 years, Moses writes to the people, he himself not able to go into the promised land because he tripped up, he got frustrated at the people, he struck the rock. But Moses is addressing the people in the book of Deuteronomy before they enter into the promised land. And he reminds the people how they refused to go in it 40 years ago. And this is why Moses didn't get to enjoy the promised land. He knew they should have went in, and he never got to enjoy it because of them. But he brings up Caleb in the midst of the discussion about the promised land and what had happened. And he tells them that Caleb was so different. In verse 34, the Lord heard your words, and he was angry, and he swore, "Not one of these men of this evil generation shall see the good land that I swore to give to their fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and to his children I will give the land on which he has trodden, because he has wholly followed the Lord." You see how he brings up Caleb again after all this time and says he's the only one. Joshua will go too, but he's the only one who stood up to everybody and said, "Guys, you're being ridiculous. God has shown us what he can do. He will surely give us the land." He was the one who was bold enough to speak up against everyone else. He was the one who had the different spirit and who wholly followed the Lord, even against all odds. Caleb was suicidal, so to speak. He was, in the minds of everyone around him, he was insane because he believed that God could do something that they thought was impossible. And he was willing to be seen as insane because he was trying to help them to see the truth. He wasn't insane. He was right. And so Caleb goes into the promised land with Joshua, and he helps Israel to conquer the promised land. He's there with them fighting. He was 40 years old whenever they failed to go into the promised land. He's 80 years old whenever they finally do go into the promised land, and he spends 5 years fighting all the Canaanites with the rest of Israel. He's out there as an 80-year-old, and you know what? There weren't many other 80-year-olds out there with him. He was 20 years older than everybody except Joshua. And he was out there fighting and leading them and defeating everybody. That's what he was doing. And whenever they've done as much as they were going to do under Joshua, they started to divide up the inheritance of the land. And whenever they got to Judah, of course, Caleb is the first one to be addressed. And Caleb could have said, "Oh, I'll take whatever we've conquered over here. That'll be just fine with me." But he doesn't say that. In Joshua chapter 14 and verse 7, we'll start in verse 6. The people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, in Kadesh Barnea, concerning me, you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again, as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, Surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years since the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was in the day that Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then, for war and for going and coming. So now, give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you have heard on that day how the Anakim were there, with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said. Do you see what Caleb is saying here? He's remembering what Moses has promised to him. And he's remembering that God told Moses he would have the land that he had gone and that he had seen. And he wanted a very specific place. A place that was a fortress with giants inside. And he said, I want that one. Up in the hill country. It's real hard to get. We hadn't conquered it yet. Let's go get that one. Maybe God will deliver that to me. And he did. 85 years old, and he's going out after the giants. He's going out after the fortress that God had promised him, because he believes that God is with him and able to give him what he has promised, just like he did 45 years earlier. We see nothing had changed. All that time wandering in the wilderness did not persuade him or cause him to drift away or harden his heart toward God. No, he was just as adamant about the faithfulness of God at this point as he was back then. If God says he'll give it, I believe he'll give it. And he trusted God. He believed that God wanted to bless his people. It's an amazing thing. It's kind of hard for us to fathom, right? I mean, who are we that God would want to bless us? And Israel probably thought that way as they were on the edge of the promised land. Who are we that God would fight for us in this promised land against these giants and against all these people that are so wicked and so evil? Who are we that God would provide us with the best land on earth? Caleb realized that they were chosen, that God had decided to love them, and he had a childlike faith that God would provide what he's promised. He had a different spirit than anyone else. He had a different perspective on God than anyone else, knowing that God is the one who brought them out of Egypt. God is the one who provided the salvation from slavery. Knowing that God was the one who provided for them the whole time they were wandering in the wilderness. He was able to give them manna from heaven. Caleb saw that and he took note. He paid attention to that. And he realized who God is, how God is more powerful than anyone could ever imagine, and able to provide from his storehouses, and his storehouses are infinite. He realized God's power and God's ability and said, surely God will give us the land he has promised to give us. We just need to believe that he will give it to us, and he will. As we read the story of Caleb, we're supposed to be encouraged by his faith, by his different spirit. And we're supposed to see that really this is exactly what God is looking for in all of us. What do you believe? What do you believe God has promised to you? And how do you believe it? How strongly do you believe it? Do you have that kind of childlike faith that goes against the odds of the impossibility of that reality and says, no, it's true, not because I can imagine it, not because I can see it happening or because it's happened in some way that I've been able to see and touch and I know, but because he says that it's a reality? Do you believe it if he said it? Whenever we look at the New Testament, God is trying to show us that we need to be like Caleb. He tries to show us that by giving us a new Caleb, a better Caleb even. That's even something you can imagine. Someone even better, someone even more perfectly following the will of God than Caleb. Caleb followed him wholly. Jesus follows him perfectly. Jesus does everything that God desires for him to do all his life. He follows God unto death. He's the greater Caleb who brings good news of a greater promised land that's waiting for all of us. Not only that, Jesus is the one who sets us free from our slavery. And Jesus is the one who provides for us in the wilderness. This is Caleb on steroids. He brings us greater and eternal promises. This is not a temporary promised land with temporary rewards. This is eternal, imperishable, undefiled, and kept in heaven. These are things that can never be taken away from us, that God is providing for us through Jesus. We must choose to wholly follow him with a new and different spirit, a spirit much like Caleb's. And that's essentially what God wanted to put inside of you and wanted to create in you. You didn't have that kind of spirit on your own. You had a stubborn, rebellious spirit that desired to do what you wanted to do and receive what you could get from everybody else. But God wanted to put his spirit within you and make you new and make you like Jesus so that you could serve him faithfully until the very end. And that new spirit that's within you is the spirit much like Caleb's. Spirit that says, I want that hill country. I want that promised land that's eternal. And I can go up against these giants, and I can go up against these fortresses of wickedness because my God is with me, and he will provide these things for me. You know, Caleb isn't mentioned too much in the New Testament. He's mentioned in Hebrews 11, of course, but notice that there's actually a point in Hebrews that I think is referring to him without naming him. In Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 12, it talks about Israel not listening to God and not believing in his promises. Hebrews chapter 3, starting in verse 12, it says, "Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it's called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have come to share in Christ, if indeed we hold our original confidence firm to the end, like Caleb. As it is said, today, if you'll hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For who were those who heard and yet rebelled? Was it not those who left Egypt, led by Moses? And with whom was he provoked for 40 years? Was it not those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient? So we see that they were unable to enter because of unbelief. Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear, lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to them, came to us just as to them. But the message they heard did not benefit them, because they were not united by faith with those who listened." Sorry, I didn't put all of it up there. You see in this text, he's talking about the Israelites failing to enter the promised land. Why? Because they didn't believe. They didn't trust that God would deliver what he said he would deliver. The promises of God are something we choose to believe and trust in and live for, or something we choose to ignore and reject and live in contradiction to. If we believe in the promises of God, we'll live for them. We'll live for the hope that God will provide those things, and we will go out and we will fight the spiritual battles in the land that is full of enemies. And we will seek to glorify our God by trusting in him to be with us as we do hard things. That's the picture that we get from Caleb. And that's the picture that we get from our Lord. And I hope that as we think about these things, we will be sure not to harden our hearts when things get hard, but to trust in God to be with us throughout all the trials in the wilderness and to remain faithful to the end. Love for us to be 85-year-olds that are out battling against Satan and battling against the spiritual forces of evil. I've known quite a few, actually. And I'd love for that to be us all, believing that God has given us strength for this very purpose and trusting in him working through us and providing us with exactly what he has promised. If there's anybody here tonight that needs to let some need be known, you need to render obedience to God, or you need to ask for a prayer request, we offer an invitation song for you to do so. But take this lesson to heart. Go out and be like Caleb, be like Jesus, and show your faith as you live in a very wicked world. Thank you. Please stand as we sing.